Hello, welcome again to a history of saps, blackjacks, and slungshots. I really like this guy here a lot. I was very lucky to get it. I know I talked about it quite a bit in my first video, but it definitely deserves its own, and timeline-wise, it makes sense to do it now. Speaking of time, think of this then as a late Victorian thing. Definitely an English late Victorian thing, I should say. So, late 1800s. There's not a lot of specificity around that, right? But definitely around then. I don't know how soon, and I don't know when it faded, but I would say it was at the height of its popularity at that point. So this is, again, an item that doesn't fit perfectly into our overall classification, sap, blackjack, slungshot, but it is a small, flexible, weighted club. It's just very, very different in construction, but it does share all those properties, which is why I count it as, one of the family. Speaking of that family, I guess that really brings up another trait that this one shares with the rest, which is that it's forgotten, right? You do not see a lot of these nowadays. You don't see them in old movies, period pieces where they should appear, and but they really should put them in there because it's just so different and really cool. So let's start taking a look at it. Here's the handle. See, this is turned hardwood. So turned hardwood means you take the hard piece of wood, of course, but you have it spinning, continually spinning. Nowadays they have machines that do that. Probably took a little bit more work in the old days, but the artisan would very carefully incise every one of those lines by hand. It's just really, really cool. And you can see that this one got a lot of attention to detail. I've seen a fair number of these online, that kind of thing, and this one is about as highly decorated as I've ever seen. That definitely leads me to believe that this one here is a gentleman's weapon. The category overall, I'm going to go ahead and say from my research, probably, as in this is a, society-approved weapon at least, where most of ours are not. Now, you can even see when the maker's name right there. Isn't that amazing? I've tried Googling it. I'm not going to be able to get a good focus on it, but you can even see the name. I've tried Googling it, got nothing, but I think that's great. This person was obviously proud of their work, and they definitely should be. So there's that short connection, which is so strange, right? This is like a medieval flail, kind of the ball variety, but shrunken down to a pocket-sized club, and with an incredibly short connection. And that is going to give these a very unique motion. A normal sap, the whole thing is kind of flexible. There's kind of a uniform flexibility to it, if you will. This one's so strange because the shaft is so long and then the connection is so short that it's going to act in a very different way. The flexibility is going to provide extra momentum. That's the whole point, right? But it's going to kind of wobble on top. That's really what that striking head is going to do. And I probably mentioned back in the Native American Slungshot War Club that the shorter variations of those are called flop heads. I don't have an example of one. I really wish I did. But those would be the only other weapons I know of, period. Native American flexible war clubs that have very short connections. Those are very popular in the Plains region, not so much in the East. Anyway, those are the only ones I know that are similar to this here, interestingly enough. You want to talk about two very different kinds of warriors, that'll do it, right? Gentleman in Victorian London versus, say, an Apache using his split open and sewed back together cowtail with a rock on one end and a shaft on the other. Weapons like this would have most usually been called life preservers, but it probably went under a variety of names. Cosh, for sure, but life preserver, things like conchbuster, rent knocker, all kinds of fun names. And look at that crack. This is likely one of the strongest, hardest woods the maker could find. There was a wood, it's a New World one called lignum vitae. I don't speak Latin, obviously, but wood of life. And it was really popular in England at this time to make anything that needed to be extremely durable. That kind of wood is one of the heaviest, I think it's considered the heaviest in the world, and correspondingly strong, so you could see why you'd want to use it for a weapon like this, and that lets you know that somebody got hit really hard with that thing, probably, to cause that crack that we saw a second ago. I shouldn't laugh about that. Let's hope it was a bad guy. So I'm going to try to give you a better view of the connection here. It's not going to work very well, but we'll try. And whatever that is, I don't know what it is. It's soft to the touch, which is interesting. The other thing is, look there. It's kind of two-dimensional in a way. You know what I mean? It's wider in one direction than in the other. And that wouldn't seem to make the best connection because it might not swing as freely in all directions. Strangely enough, Native American war clubs, some flop heads did the same thing, but not all, and not even most, I would say. So here you can get a view of the metal, right, the lead that's in there, lead in the head, as almost always, right, lead easy to find, very dense, makes for a great load in SAPS. Now, I have absolutely no idea how this was put together. It's kind of remarkable, really. So you've got this wood that was shaped into this ball shape, but the lead was inserted there. You can get a little bit of an indication when you see that, but I just don't get it because I don't see a giant seam or join. It was almost like you would think the lead was already there, and then the whole thing got shaped down, if that makes any sense. I don't know. If anybody knows how these are put together, I'd love to know. There are some YouTube videos and stuff on turned hardwood, really cool to see, but it's always making like a straight baton, never a flexible sap like this. And also never this complex, composite construction, which is again a hallmark of saps. This is metal, wood, and whatever kind of cord that is. And there's also like metal pegs and studs in there that you can see if you look real close. So just to give you an idea of some of the weapons being used contemporaneously, here's our bosun's cosh, if you recall it. So this is almost the exact same time and place, let's say the exact same time and place as our life preserver. And this guy here, I keep teasing him, his turn it's coming, it's on the way. And again, you see that handle, you're talking about this mid-19th century, late 19th century kind of club, often a policeman's, but not necessarily. And back to this. So just with the three of those, and of course I could throw in more, but that gives you an idea of the strange assortment of small handheld impact weapons being used at this time, which, again, back to my central thesis, have been completely forgotten. I should mention, by the way, I said something about police a second ago. This could have been a policeman's instrument. I have seen similar, again, kind of English flophead clubs like this, if you will, at least in one picture where it was verified that it was, from a policeman. Now, they obviously, in the UK, they tended to carry the traditional billy, right, the hardwood billy club, but have evidence that at least on occasion they would use flexible ones like this instead. Or again, it just could have been something that would be sold to a man of means who wanted something to bop somebody in the head with when necessary, but that showed that he could afford nice stuff. Now, I talked earlier in the video about like where this came from. I didn't mean the place because I've been clear, right? England. I meant like, it's DNA, it's weapons DNA. Where did it come from? I don't think this descended from earlier saps. I think, and I'm certainly guessing, this is a parallel path, and this is more of a descendant of the fighting flail, the agricultural flail from the Middle Ages turned into a kind of war flail. Then that evolved into several different kinds, just let you take a look while I'm talking, of weapons. And essentially I'm saying this is kind of a small civilian pocket-sized descendant of what a lot of you would think of as a Morning Star or a mace or that kind of thing. The names have gotten pretty sloppy over time. Technically, you would just call it a flail. You would not have noticed when I held it a second ago, obviously, because you can't feel it, but this is a very unwieldy weapon, which is usually not a good thing. There's no modern examples of these kinds of things where I would buy one and happily experiment with it. I'm sure my son would love to help me with that, right? We could beat up some sofa pillows or whatever. But unlike with almost every other weapon in my arsenal, this is one I don't have a modern recreation of, and nobody makes them. Because it's, stiff for the majority of it, flexible at the very end, and then heavily weighted on just one end. The shaft feels almost weightless. It's not, but that's how it feels in comparison. So it just makes for a strange fit. You see that peg there? I was talking about the composite construction and how complicated it is. There's another indication. So the more you look at it, the more you realize how complicated this thing is. From both a functional and construction standpoint to a decoration one. I did find verification that weapons like this were used in the States, and of course that's not surprising at all, but I will say I think it was much more popular across the pond. Again, as always with the subject, there's very limited information, not much of a historical record to go on, but I'm going to go ahead and stick with that. The final thing is that I bought this, it was being sold as a piece of folk art, so that's how forgotten these are, because you can find these for sale once in a while online, but even within our category, these are pretty unknown. But now you know what it is. Thank you.